Cooking has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the reason why I think there are so many benefits is because the only place you can be when you're cooking is in the here and now. You have to be present. Whenever I'm dealing with somebody who is spiraling, the best place to put them is in a kind of some sort of creative space. And the kitchen can be that for a lot of people.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dr. Drew Ramsey podcast. I am just absolutely thrilled to have you here so we can keep up the fight for good mental health and building mental fitness. I hope you've been enjoying these episodes. We have certainly been enjoying all of your comments and feedback. Thank you. Please keep sharing these episodes and letting people know about our work. And we want to keep bringing you great content and great guests around mental health, around nutritional psychiatry, around mental fitness, and all the things that we can do in our everyday lives to really take charge of our mental health. We have a wonderful guest and a really original member of the Brain Foodie family. Rebecca Katz is an internationally recognized chef. She's an author. She's been thinking about mood and food really as long as anyone. I met Rebecca early in my career, and she's really one of the chefs that helped me, took me under her wing a little bit, gave me a lot of confidence around this idea, simple idea. Food is medicine. Food is brain medicine. Food, it can really help us in our battle for better mental health. A little bit more about Rebecca. She's a culinary translator. I saw this firsthand when she totally transformed the kitchen hospital at Eskenazi Hospital as part of the Center for Mind, Body, Medicine, Intervention, and Collaboration there that I was a part of. What was that? It must have been like 2014-ish. Let's talk about her book. She's the author of Clean Soups, Simple Nourishing Recipes for Health and Vitality. She wrote The Healthy Mind Cookbook, big flavor recipes to enhance brain function, mood, memory, and mental clarity. That was 2015. The Longevity Kitchen. I really love her books around helping patients who are struggling with cancer. Cancer and chemotherapy can just be so hard in terms of taste, in terms of changes in palate and nausea. So her book, The Cancer Fighting Kitchen, nourishing big flavor recipes for cancer treatment and beyond, and as well as I really love One Bite at a Time, nourishing recipes for cancer survivors. This idea of really thinking about how to pack in nutrient density. She has done so much, whether it's Italy, where she actually is just back from, where she's done lots of work in teaching and learning, to what she's doing now, focusing more on her life as an artist. So, Rebecca Katz, welcome to the podcast. It's such a treat to be with you and to see you again after all this time.
Thank you, Drew, for having me. I'm just so thrilled to be here.
Well, and I want to get right into it because you're one of the original nutritional psychiatry folks in my mind. I got into this world right out of residency, maybe 2004, and there just weren't that many people thinking about food and mental health. So I wondered what got you started thinking about nutritional psychiatry.
Well, I think back then, I wasn't thinking about it as nutritional psychiatry as it is now. But when I was working with the Center for Mind, Body, Medicine, and I was creating these menus that had to translate what doctors were talking about to the plate, mood was a big issue that would come up. And at that time, as I was working more in the field of food and cancer, but you can't separate these different things. Like you can't partition mood and mental health and food from any aspect. So I'm going to say that 2004 was when I consciously started really embracing it. But I will say that during culinary school, I started becoming super aware of how food affected my ability to think clearly, to regulate anxiety, and to perform, at peak performance. And so in a personal way, I'm going back to, 1997.
Well, it sounds like a lot of us, you sort of notice something in your own life as an eater, and in some way that food could be a set of tools, along with all the other wonderful things that it does for us, a tool to help you deal with some of the maybe feelings, as you said, of anxiety that you were dealing with. I wonder if there are some things early on working with cancer patients that also signal something to you about how food is medicine.
Oh, big time. Well, people who are going through cancer treatment are dealing with a myriad of things. Mostly during treatment, their taste buds are compromised. So, kind of the foundation of where I got my little kind of how I really got super interested in how can you make healthy food taste great when your taste buds aren't operating at 100%. And working with people with cancer going through that is a real challenge because their taste buds are compromised. So how do you have somebody whose taste buds are working at like 20%, whereas our taste buds are working at like 80%? How can you elevate their food and their taste so that they're going to want to eat and eat well, just eat to support their brain health, their treatment health. And so that was like my inroad. And I know that maybe you remember this, but I used to get up there at Food is Medicine, and I used to take like a pot of soup that was literally tasted like a 0 on a scale of 1 to 10 on the yum factor. And I would build it up, and I would bring people up on stage, and I would have people taste it, and they would give their honest feedback of like, this is really horrible. And then I would call it fast. I'd use really healthy fats, acid, salt, and a little bit of sweet to elevate the flavor of the dish that I was preparing. Now, at the beginning, I was doing this just with cancer patients that I was working with, but then it became like the bedrock of everything in every book that I've ever written. And I call it the power of yum. So fat, acid, salt, and a little bit of sweet. And so I'd have these doctors on stage, they would taste, and ultimately I would keep them up there until I got this involuntary spasm of vocal delight where people would go, mm. And that's sort of a way just to say that, there is a mind connection, right? From how we perceive what we're tasting. And it has to do with flavor and something that's maybe hitting in the back of the taste buds and moving to the front of the palate. Texture, these are all like flavor, texture, whether something is smooth and creamy and yummy or something, maybe you're like a crispy, crunchy person, or you're a smooth, creamy person, or whatever it is that your culinary personality is like. All of these things are huge in how you are mentally going to perceive what you're eating and whether you're going to find it nourishing to you. And I think that, to me, more than anything, what I discovered in working with people with cancer is that it is a mental game here. Our connection to food is our connection to life, and how we zero in on how somebody is going to perceive that through taste, through the smell, through the way food looks, through the way it feels, their actual engagement with food is paramount. And so that's really, I think, that my link into the cancer world kind of gave me that insight, but then it's taken me so much farther and so much deeper, and how people can form healthy connections with food through their taste buds.
I love that, Rebecca. I love the power of yum, and I think everyone listening can appreciate where it's so important to talk to our friends and colleagues who are chefs, or who maybe, if you don't know, formally trained chefs like Rebecca, people in your life who exude that, the best of the foodie vibe. Just really love what the power of yum can do for all of us. And I think it's such a lost point in all of the brain food and healthy mind and nutritional psychiatry movement sometimes. It is really around giving people a full, sensual, engaging, delicious experience, has its own mental health benefit. And I was also thinking about you and the patients with cancer, where you take up this challenge. You're saying, wow, your taste buds are really struggling. And so as a chef, I want to take this challenge to really make it palatable and delicious and nutritious for you, because you're in such a tough spot medically. I'm wondering how that translates to mental health a little bit, as you think about working with patients that have challenges with mood, challenges with anxiety. I think another one that doesn't get talked about enough are challenges with trauma, where trauma affects how we eat, how we feed ourselves and nourish ourselves. I'm wondering if there are some things that you've sort of seen in your work, some themes around what we need when we're in these states or struggling with our mental health, what we need from our food.
Yeah, one thing I think it's kind of important to address is waking up people's appetite centers, who are struggling with anxiety, depression, trauma, because I feel like the appetite center kind of gets a little bit compromised. And again, what is the way in, right? To get people to even think about, like, before I even get into saying, wow, these are the foods that are really good for you. It's like, how do you get somebody even to the to the table to want to even um, eat something that's going to nourish them, right? So I think there's just an acknowledgement there to say, all right, as a chef, or as somebody who is caring for somebody, or that is going through a rough time, how am I going to be able to nourish this person again, so that they feel like that appetite center is going to wake up? And then I would say um, there are certain foods that are, I'm just going to start with some of the things that people don't think about. And that is herbs and spices, and things that are going to take sort of what we think is quote unquote healthy, good brain foods, and make them exciting, like where there's an aha moment, right? So, in other words, it's like, I'm not going to give you a dish of steamed broccoli and tell you, like, this fiber is really good for you and it's going to be good for your anxiety, or I just want you to eat these raw nuts because they're really good for, they're good for your memory, or they're they're going to help you in this way, or lentils are like, little nanobots that are going to wake up your memory, or or I want you to eat these sardines because they're really, they've got all these great omega-3s and they're going to really be, make you feel better. I'm really always interested in, okay, how are you going to respond to these foods? And in what way are we going to make them exciting for you, so you're not thinking about necessarily what your mental state is. In other words, as a chef, I'm always trying to transcend that and get you tasting and thinking about incorporating these things so that they're really going to taste good and that you're going to feel empowered by eating these foods.
I love it because it's almost inverted in how often we think about this. Like as you're talking about, the lentil robots being amazing for your health and the sardines. I was saying, were you listening to my talk earlier that I was giving? I was cranking through my slide decks and saying lentil, 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 and fermented foods. And I love this idea. As a chef, as an artist with the food, you're really wanting to understand where the desire and where's the appetite.
Right.
And that people don't necessarily have an appetite for better memory. Like preserving we like those ideas, but it reminds me of how in therapy, when we're living in the world of ideas too much, we think and get a little suspicious there are intellectualized defenses going on, right? That you're not speaking to me from the heart, from the soul, from the pain, from the struggle. They're ideas, and ideas are great. But ideas are where we think about sardines as omega-3s and great for the Mediterranean diet and part of our seafood meal of the week. And we don't think about sardine as the artistic media of how do you get to the power of yum. And that's actually a really challenging one for a lot of people. I remember the first time I made a pasta con sardi recently. It just really was yummy, not fishy, just what I needed. But I think a lot of us don't maybe have those go-to recipes with some of these foods. We know we should eat them, but we haven't worked on building our appetite for them beyond the nutrient density, perks.
Right. That's right. So I'm always coming from, to your point, from the more sensual part of what eating can be. And the thing about that is if I can hook somebody in that way, right? Through that, like, that feeling like they are feeling nourished from here, right? Just like what you were talking about, like what you're trying to do when you want somebody to go deeper. I always want to go deeper, and that is always going to be your taste buds don't lie. And to your point, like taking sardines and making a pasta con sarde or doing something different with them, or how can you use anchovies in a whole different way that you would never think of, ooh, slimy anchovies, or how are you going to use a fermented food like miso, which is like a flavor bomb of umami, into things that all of a sudden you're like, you know what? Man, I really want to eat like this because it tastes really good. And by the way, I'm feeling better. And by the way, I'm feeling empowered, you know? So um, I have to walk that fine line as in my world of being the culinary nutritionist, like understanding what these foods can do for you, but then translating them into something that is really going to, you know, spark that other part of yourself that's going to encourage you or empower you to want to incorporate more of these foods into your life. It's like
Tastes delicious. It's a
taste.
simple, it's a simple
Guess what?
motivator.
Yeah. If it doesn't taste good, you won't eat it.
I think that's so true. I also, as you're talking, I'm thinking about how it feels our palates have gotten hijacked a little bit, and that some of what is confusing people or maybe causing us to struggle with food choices is some of the ultra processed foods.
Oh,
They taste delicious, and if you've been off of them for a while, like I mostly have, some of them you can taste the fake fat, or the monk fruit or stevia or whatever doesn't quite taste right to you because you're not used to those things. But people's palate maybe has been hijacked a bit, and I'm wondering when you work with individuals who are in a period where there's a lot of processed food on board. Do you think about like retraining their palate, and how do you do that?
I'm so glad you asked this question because I'm just going to tell you the story of um, a client that I worked with who was really going through a rough time. And it was an SOS from his doctor and his wife to come in with a culinary intervention. And he was really just living on processed food. And I had to go in there and I was not going to go in there with this philosophy of my food is better.
Huh.
I was not, one of the things I'm very careful about is not being dogmatic. I'm going in through the back door. And again, I'm going in with my taste, through the taste buds. So I had to clean out the pantry. I had to do the whole, kind of the refrigerator resuscitation, the pantry rehabilitation, the whole thing. I mean, I had to take the Teddy Grahams away and watch him curl up in his Barca lounger, all of those things. But I said, I'm not taking anything away that I'm not going to replace with something that I really feel you're going to enjoy, right? So that's one thing. I'm never going to say to somebody, you can't. I'm going to say, wait till you try this, right?
This is where we announce that this episode has been sponsored by Rebecca Katz's Brain Food Teddy Grahams that you can find on. No, I'm curious. You're replacing things and you're taking some of these processed foods. What do you replace something like a Teddy Graham or gummy bears? I mean, these things that we all want to not love as much as we do, but
well, they're. I mean. I'm sorry. This is now sponsored by Rebecca Katz recipe for triple brittle.
Okay. Oh, I like this.
Okay. So the Teddy Graham is a crispy, crunchy, kind of sweet cookie, right?
And special little bear.
And it's a special little bear. Now, I can't deliver the little bear because I don't have the patience to cut out the triple brittle into a little bear. But the triple brittle is sesame seed, pumpkin seed, and sunflower seed with allspice, ginger, and cinnamon, and a little bit of maple syrup and a little dash of vanilla. And it's mixed up, and then it's spread out onto a baking sheet, and it's baked at a 350-degree oven for like 20 minutes. And then it cools. And then when it cools, you get this wonderful, and it's got a pinch of salt in it. So you get something that's not too sweet, right? And crispy and crunchy with the cinnamon and all of these spices. All of a sudden your taste buds are like, oh, wow. So this gentleman tastes it and he's like, oh, I feel like my taste buds have just come alive, right? And it's giving him the crispy and the crunchy, right? So then I moved on to some savory dishes with him, my everything drizzle, where all those green, the green herbs, the parsley, the basil, the mint, the cilantro, all of those things with olive oil and salt and lemon juice, simple. And I drizzled it over just a little piece of salmon, and I had him taste it. And again, it sort of was like, aha, his taste buds. They didn't need to be retrained. They were woken up. They were just woken up. So they're there.
These green sauces. I've forgotten about those green sauces of yours. Those are like so
like
incredible.
The pistachio pesto, because I just came back from Sicily, right? The land of pistachio, right?
I said pistachio pesto earlier today, in all seriousness, and it's a little bit of an obsession that I have. In Eat to Beat Depression and Anxiety, there's a pesto formula with this idea that you can use almost any green. You can use so many different types of nuts. Like, we don't need to limit ourselves to the amazing classic of basil and pine nuts. But tell us about pistachio pesto and what pesto secrets do you have?
I've got
for us from Italy.
I mean, just give
it to us.
I have tons. So now you've got me so excited. Anyway, pistachio. So my first trip to Sicily, Drew, was in 2001, and I cooked with 8 Sicilian grandmothers. I went with my culinary teacher. She took 4 of us. This is like, we had been graduated and out in the world and cooking and had, we're chefs. And she chose 4 of us because she wanted to see if this concept would work. Like, what would it be like to, to take chefs and have them work with these Sicilian grandmothers? Well, it changed my world. And one of the things about Sicily is that it's a region of, it's the largest region in Italy, and it has been taken over by so many different regimes. So it has a Greek influence, it's got a Tunisian influence, it's got an Arabic influence, it's got, so it has, in my opinion, the best food of all of the regions of Italy are in Sicily. And that is the land of the pistachio. So I got turned on to pistachios in Italy because they are all about pistachios and they're all about mint. And so their pesto is not the Genovese pesto that we know, which is basil and pine nuts and olive oil. Their pesto is mint and pistachio, and olive oil and lemons.
And I'm just trying to. Wow, so it's like a minty, citrusy pistachio, and they do that like we do, like they put it over pasta. And
yeah. I mean, they really use it more as a spread there. So it's like not like a Genovese pesto where you're gonna take your pasta and do it that way, but it's more of a spread as a condiment. It's something to spread on things. Then I took that concept back and I made it a little bit looser and not as thick, not more of the spread, but more of, adding a little bit more olive oil, adding a little bit more lemon juice, adding a little bit more water just to make it a little bit. And then I added parsley to it to give it a little bit more green, So pistachios are just pistachio pesto for every and anything. I mean, pistachio is a very creamy nut. So it's incredibly satiating. I mean, to sit and eat pistachio is in many ways, I think, a lot more enjoyable than sitting and eating walnuts. I mean, walnuts have a lot of tannins in them.
No, I'd agree with that. Like that little bitterness.
But
and then the creaminess of cashew, I think of as similar. Like in the nut world, when I eat it, I feel that kind of creamy, almost like a little sweetness in a cashew, like in a pistachio.
Yeah. So these are the creamy nuts. So I'm like, first of all, any green will do, like cilantro, mint, basil, parsley, anything you're growing
Rebecca,
in your garden.
Come on, keep going. What's the other green that you love in pesto? Come on.
Chervil. What else?
Come on, there's one more. Come on. It's me, Rebecca. It's me. Come on.
Kale.
Thank you.
Kale and pistachios are they're partners in crime.
Okay, thank you for that.
And I'm just going to say, if we're talking about and baby kale, and arugula, right? I mean, all of those cruciferous veg, all of those can be like arugula and pistachio and arugula and cashew and kale. And I mean, these are fun
I love
ways
this
to
mix.
get green. What? Yeah.
I love this mix as you're also noting, hey, take the classic, like a Sicilian pesto I didn't know about, pistachio and mint. add in a little parsley, add in a little lemon, right? Add in your favorite greens, see what happens. And I think that's one of the reasons that these really wonderful traditional dishes like a pesto from the Mediterranean region have so much appeal to them. And I think for everybody listening, they have so much utility for you is they get to this power of yum super quickly because they have these very potent, flavorful things that we tend to leave out, right? If we're all honest, how many of us are cooking with lots of fresh herbs? I know some of you are, and I want to more, but we kind of fall out of habit of that, where there's just we kind of get bored of our wild salmon. Why? Well, because we're not putting some amazing pistachio mint pesto on there occasionally, or one of those green sauces where you do a blend basically of a lot of greens with some olive oil, and it just creates this incredible sauce that just blows up the dish.
Yes, it blows up the dish and it wakes up your taste buds, right? And you're adding all those extra nutrients. P.S. But
Mm-hmm.
it's the dollop of yum. It's the high note. You know what I mean? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you're eating something fatty, like, I mean, salmon, which has got that it's a base note. Salmon is like the base note. Any of these small fishes, the base note, the fatty fishes, like black cod or anything, they need a light note. They need that high note. They need the citrus. They need, like a miso. I mean, you could throw miso into your pesto, and you'd add a fermented food in there. I mean, any of these sauces, it feels like, oh, when we say the word sauce, it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be like, but actually, while your salmon is baking, you can throw these things together and they hold in the refrigerator for 5 days or more, and you can freeze them.
Is this where you feel you as a chef, when you, not that you do this, but like you're at someone's house is like mine and I'm doing my best to impress you, but it's probably not quite chef quality. It's good. I'm not that you say this, but it is what kind of separates those of us, cooks, let's say, from chefs, is this ability to kind of know you can make a really amazing sauce and put it in the fridge. And kind of like for example, the rest of us maybe meal prep a little bit. Like we meal prepped lentils the other night. And I had them a couple of days later. I felt like a hero having these amazing nutrient dense leftovers. They were so yummy. But I don't usually like meal prep maybe a couple of sauces or some cool green vinaigrette. And it sounds like maybe that's one of the things for everyone listening to think about a little bit, maybe a little, helping us get a little bit more yum in our fridges.
Yes. And I have to say, working early in my career, I worked in the restaurant business, in what I call in the kitchens of restaurants. And that's like it's like working in the ER, right? I mean, not, but you're sort of, you have to be prepared for anything to happen at any time, right? So all of these kind of sauces, if you've ever been to a restaurant, right, and you see the drizzles on the plate, and it's all fancy, and you see these dots of green, or these coulis or anything. Man, we are making those sauces like 3 days in advance, sometimes 5 days in advance, and they're in these, squeeze bottles, right? And when I started working, then more in cookbook, developing cookbooks and recipes, I had to make things to test them and see, like, how far in advance can somebody make this so it's practical, right? Because cooking, there's two parts of cooking, Drew, as you know. There's prepping, which you do in advance, and then there's the cooking part, which actually, the bringing it all together is actually the quickest part, right? It's the prep.
What is that prep?
It's the prep. And the idea in terms of, like, to get your head around this, from, so you don't have like anxiety about going into the kitchen is that you don't have to do it all at once. It's like I've got herbs and, whatever, and I'm going to make my nutrient dense, fabulous flavor bomb sauce for the week. And I can take a scoop of that sauce and I can add more lemon juice and olive oil and lemon zest and make it into my green salad dressing while I'm making my sauce, and I can have my condiments, my personalized, flavor bomb condiments in my refrigerator for the whole week that I can put on my lentils, that I can put on my fish, that I can do these things with. So I like to look at cooking as, a mind game where you get your things prepped in advance so that when you go to cook, you really are just assembling. So there's the shopping, the prepping, the cooking, and the cleaning up. So if you're doing the cooking, then you have to delegate the cleanup to somebody else. But if you're doing your prep, that's really like nine, and that's like three-quarters of the game right there.
Oh, I love that. I think that's also part of your answer as you're thinking about our palate and palate development. I think part of it was just, serve delicious foods because the taste buds are waiting for it. As you said, it's not about palate expansion as much as it's just waking them up. Like,
That's
hey,
right.
remember this? Which I think is great advice. And then I love this idea around prepping. And because a lot of us think meal prep, but the food's kind of naked, right? It's like sweet potatoes or some
Right.
rice in there or is avocado salad. But the idea of, along with that, prepping a couple of flavor bombs. Rebecca's books have lots of wonderful dressings like this. It's something I always note when we do the mental fitness kitchen with Emily Berner of how she has her mise en place done. She has all these little tips that just, really expand flavor, but kind of show off her ability in some way, as you're talking about, to prep and to kind of have the foundations of a dish there. She does like 4 dishes in an hour as we're presenting. And a lot of it is I'm realizing, as you're saying, it's just that prep. And I think for everybody listening, if you're feeling overwhelmed in the kitchen or uninspired, which we all get to around food sometimes.
Huh.
Oh, I love having. Tell me about that. Tell me that reaction, Rebecca.
Oh my gosh. So, I have to say, here I've written all these cookbooks and developed all these recipes, and I swear to God, every night, every day, I wake up and I think, what am I going to make for dinner tonight? Or what am I going to make? What am I going to make this week? What's my menu going to be?
Well, is it a different part of your brain in the sense when you're thinking about a really fun cancer fighting recipe or a healthy mind recipe, you're revolving around maybe some ingredients or some flavor profiles or it's a real creative production in a certain way, as opposed to dinner tonight is more of a, I don't know, like the business end of cooking. And
And you know what? It's the shoemaker's kids, right? So for me, like dinner is the most important meal of the day. It's my chance to kind of unwind, but it does become a bit utilitarian. Like you're not necessarily using, well, I shouldn't say that because I do get creative around it. But you're right, it's a different side of the brain because when I'm creating like a story for a cookbook is recipes are just a story. They're like little stories, and
I think you
all of
just
the
demonstrated
meat.
that with the pistachio in Sicily. I never
Yes.
really thought about Sicily like that before. That I just think about it as it's one of the regions of the Mediterranean. I bet their pasta is really yummy because I don't know Italy well, not to share my ignorance there. But the idea that it's this incredible multicultural mix with this long culinary history that really mixes together so many cultures. Yeah, it's just wonderful to start hearing that perspective from you.
Yeah. So, you know, at home, I just, at the end of the day, for me, um, if I know what it is that I'm going to make, it's a lot easier. So I do, like everybody else, I have to think, this is my shopping. This is what I'm going to make this week. What is that going to be? And getting down to business. Once I'm in there doing it and I've got a roadmap, then it's really a joy. And I want to talk about this one thing about cooking because I think it's really important. Cooking has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the reason why I think there are so many benefits for our mind, right? The act of cooking itself is because the only place you can be when you're cooking is in the here and now. You have to be present. You're cutting you're chopping herbs or you're baking something. It's like if you are anywhere else, right? If you're too far or you're way in your head or whatever, you're going to miss the timer going off or you're going to cut your finger, right? I mean, there's something about the idea of putting together something that has a beginning, a middle, and an end when things are so chaotic in our lives and there's so much going on that's out of our control. When you're in the kitchen, you are in control of that moment. And a funny thing happens. Time expands in the kitchen. It's like you're tapping into a creative part of your brain where you are creating something for yourself. And it's so tangible. It is a tangible thing when sometimes things are so intangible and we get so in our head and we get so in that cycle. Whenever I'm dealing with somebody who is spiraling, the best place to put them is in a kind of some sort of creative space. And the kitchen can be that for a lot of people.
I love that. I love this idea also that you're talking about. I think a rare tension for people, a rare kind of environment where we both have a lot of control. We all like that at the end of the day, even if we're not control freaks, having some control. But then we also have that creative spontaneity that happens with cooking. Like I made a bad fried rice last night and I did, it's like, what veggies do I have? All of a sudden it's like cabbage, Brussels sprout, peas, and I'm chopping them up. Okay, are these going to go together? We'll see. But it got rejected by my son. But I ate it. It was very tasty. But or what I'm thinking about your sauce thing. I think this just wasn't any good because I just I don't know, some bad sauces that were in my fridge, as opposed to really maybe thinking through a little bit more of the flavor profiles that might make it more palatable or a little more, have that power of yum. And I totally agree. And I think it's good to emphasize for everyone listening to of not just thinking about the nutrients. And Rebecca's made a couple of really great points about that. One being where she starts with this motivation of appetite. But I also think you see it here where the nutritional psychiatry benefits of being in flow state in your kitchen. And it's not because, you're making the most amazing, complex dish, but just that you're in the process with the beginning, a middle, and an end. You're going to complete it. You're going to have something nourishing. It's, I love what you're talking about with the cutting. I remember a long time ago, my mom sort of said something to me along the lines of, she knew it was really time to check in with her mental health if she ever cut herself when she was cooking. She said it was a real, like, she would put down the knife and I remember she told me when I said, what are you doing? She says, this doesn't happen to me much, but when it happens, I really stop. I know I'm like out there in my head too much. I'm not paying attention to the sharp knife in my hand. And it really struck me as good for us, right? As you're saying, and occupying our mind, but also probably telling us about something. If you're having a hard time being there chopping the celery and you keep drifting off into something, it sort of shows you something about the level of stress and distraction and internal preoccupation that, so often we're carrying around with us. You mentioned miso. Sorry to jump in here, but I'm noticing we have a few minutes left. I know people have lots of questions for you still because I'm just such a treat to have a chef here with us, everyone. And so I want to keep asking Rebecca about a couple of things that I know everybody listening, has some challenges with. And when you mentioned miso and fermented foods, but when we think about food categories that really, have not been emphasized by the medical establishment or even the health establishment until pretty recently, fermented foods are up there. And so I'm wondering what fermented foods you love and that are kind of accessible to those of us who maybe aren't as familiar.
Yeah. So it's so interesting because I have friends that are big fermenters. So I am not going to be the person who is making homemade sauerkraut and kimchi because I'm going to go to my friends for that, right? So it's like you have to kind of own up to what you're
Mm-hmm.
willing to do,
So our first step
right?
is like, are you a fermenter or
Or
are you going to
not,
go buy the
right?
stuff? Yeah.
Right. So, but I'm going to tell you two accessible ones. I think miso, um, white miso, or even a dark miso. You can get it at the store. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it is
We get it in the refrigerated
the
section.
refrigerated
So,
section. And now, I mean, in a lot of stores, it doesn't even have to be refrigerated. It comes like in these little squeeze packages. So, and you can keep it in your refrigerator. It lasts forever. And the thing about miso is, it does have this, it's fermented soybean, and it has this umami flavor. Now, what I mean by umami, it's like the Japanese call it the fifth taste. There is something savory about it that really hits all the notes on your taste buds. So you can take something like miso and make a miso ginger like spread that you can just spread across your salmon with a little bit of lime juice and
mm-hmm.
either broil it or bake it or whatever. And it's all of a sudden, it's going to bring sort of this wonderful flavor to it. Or you can make a miso ginger vinaigrette or, a miso lime slaw. It's like take a scoop. It's like take a spoonful and add it. It's kind of like one of the most approachable um, ferments. Another ferment that doesn't get a lot of airtime is apple cider vinegar, which
Mm.
which is fermented. So whenever you're making a salad dressing or you need a splash of acid, you need something bright, take a quarter of a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar and like add it to your broccoli or add it to, something that's just sort of a little flat. But certainly make use it for, maybe with a mix with your salad dressing, like lemon juice and a little apple cider vinegar. These are the easy things. Things also that are, if you're a kimchi fan, um, kimchi sour, a kimchi stir fried rice is like a great thing to add into like a stir fry or a fried rice.
Yeah, I'm not really that familiar with kimchi. I mean, I eat it a little bit here and there, but in Eat to Beat Depression and Anxiety, we did a kimchi stir fried rice because I thought it was, like a way to approach it, and also something that sort of quite delicious and palatable. I love the miso recommendation. I want
Oh,
everybody listening to try that out, just because we all get like in our ruts, or
it's
miso is
true.
something. That's when we go out to Japanese restaurants and we don't bring those things home. I remember I went to Japan a few years ago for the second time, but hadn't been since I was in my 20s, and I came back with everything to make Japanese broths. I brought it, and it was just became such a kind of big part of my diet for, I don't know, 6 months or so, where I just always be drinking this wonderful broth of smoked skipjack tuna and seaweed, and so miso is a great recommendation, Rebecca, and I think it's something, if you're looking for a little bit of a fun experimentation over the next few weeks, I hope that's one that will creep in. Rebecca, I want to talk a little bit about some of the foods that are personally meaningful for you and your mental health. I think everyone listening has heard me say lentils and sardines and kale way too many times. But what are some of the foods that really do it for you, especially maybe when you feel like you need a little extra something?
Well, I'm going to use the A word. So I just came back from Sicily. So anchovies.
Hmm.
Don't everybody's going to be like, "Ew." Okay. So,
I mean, I don't know. I think we got a sophisticated foodie
okay.
audience for this
So,
call, but I used to say that about
right.
anchovies.
So, I traveled this time in Sicily with my niece, who, like, I think was an anchovy in her former life because she just loves them. She loves the small fishes. So, and again, Sicily is like the center for anchovies. Um, Anchovies, tuna, sardines, whatever. But the thing that I love about anchovies is that, again, they kind of are a little umami bomb and they can fold in to dressings. I mean, whether you're making a Caesar dressing, right, for a Caesar salad, or you mince them up and you add them to your broccoli, or you add them even to a pesto. But that's like, a way there's kind of a little brininess that gets brightened up with lemon and herbs. I think people just think of them as these little slimy things in like a little jar.
Yeah, salty,
They're
fishy,
salty,
like
fishy, and like,
put them on pizza.
yeah. But really, so that would be one thing. The other thing that tend to, I was on a kick, especially when I was in Greece, where I would have sardines every day on this bed of beautiful greens. And I tend to I make my sardines, I take them and I give them the biggest bath of lemon juice and herbs. And then, have them with, just fresh greens and a really bright dressing. I crave like I think my brain foods are, um, when I really need something. The other thing we haven't talked about is grass fed beef.
Oh,
And that,
tell us your thoughts on that.
oh yeah, man, I'm like, bring it on. But that's another area where sometimes I just need a little bit of grass fed beef in my world. And
Mm.
grilled, pan seared, whatever. I love doing a chimichurri, which is another green sauce to brighten it up. Um,
Such a good recommendation, the chimichurri, and I love this idea about meat being something that your body craves occasionally, and you listen to that, and you get a great, grass fed source, so you're getting a much higher quality, lower calorie meat, and more nutrient dense, but often supporting a local a local grass farmer, but local farmer who's trying to feed cows what they've always eaten. So and I love the chimichurri sauce. We're just sorry to wax on about these sauces, but it's just such a great way to add tons of phytonutrients, tons of flavor, add that appetite factor, and really add a ton of health benefits. And so it's just a really good example of a way that you can up level a steak or can up level burger night by improving the beef quality and then improving and increasing the nutrient density and the amount of plants that you're adding into that meal. Really, really great point. Because I think so often in the wellness space, beef is just such a polarizing topic, idea, concept, and the usefulness of it for some people kind of, I don't know, just gets missed. It's a very inexpensive, good protein source, very palatable, especially for families and when they're young kids. Just a great food for a lot of folks, and often demonized, polarized, whatever it is. So I appreciate you mentioning it as something that's part of your plan, especially again as you're maybe feeling you need a little boost.
yeah, I have this great farmer. He runs a regenerative farm, and taught me a lot about regenerative farming. And, so lamb is, you know, lamb and beef. But when you're eating really good quality grass-fed beef, you don't need much. That's the thing. It's like, and I do want to say this thing about like um uh I, about polarization in sort of what we um I have always come from the school of everything in moderation, including moderation. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like one of the things that can be a little upsetting is when in this food as medicine space that you've got this polarization, um, that certain foods are just off limits or bad or whatever. And I think that messes with people's getting to the plate in a more healthy and nourishing way, right? Because I think people get confused, you know?
Well, it's hard. It's hard to have that mindset too. I feel that as a parent sometime where I don't know, feeding my child something that I know somebody thinks is horrible, whether I don't say it's butter, and or olive oil, or someone who thinks I should never feed my kids beef or whatever it is, or pizza. And they do it kind of gets into your head a little bit, like a little, like you kind of lose your confidence or feel judged or worried about your food choices in a way that I think is really unhelpful to people, especially as you note, even a culinary genius like yourself is so creative, made so many different cookbooks, so many different recipes, been all over the world. Even you kind of, wonder about like what's for dinner and feel a little
Yes,
fatigued and a little like, oh, again.
totally. So I think we have to give ourselves you know, a big break, that sometimes there are going to be things that really are nourishing to us, but everybody is different. And some people, they want a little bit of animal protein. And some people are maybe not of that camp, and that's fine because there's room for everybody in the conversation.
Well, especially when we get to spend time with you and we get to get such a joyful sense of your spirit and your creativity and your love of food. And, I hope everybody really throughout this talk has felt this wisdom Rebecca brings to the conversation, having been an original member of the food as medicine movement. I mean, we haven't emphasized enough about it, but Rebecca's work with the Center for Mind Body Medicine, and Jim Gordon, who's also been on the podcast, as well as many of the leaders out there, folks like Tanveet Sethi, our friend, who we all look to Rebecca for inspiration and just for this great vibe. I still remember the first Center for Mind Body Medicine conference. It was in Indianapolis where I
Yes.
met you. And you did this food demonstration to all these doctors, and it was just such a delight. And everyone there left with this beaming smile. I'm still in touch with some of the people, and so thank you for that inspiration. Thanks for having a podcast all about food and mental health, where we get to think about the nitty gritty of things like pistachio pesto with mint and anchovies and grass fed beef. And some of the other great recommendations like miso that you've given us throughout this time. I do, Rebecca. I wonder, you've been through a lot of different things in your life. Now we're finding you in a period where I think you're spending more time as an artist, and I'm wondering if you can leave us with, something of a mantra or a mental fitness kind of tip that you're either thinking about now or that has kept you going through the many phases of your life.
Yes. Well, so I've always been a painter. And in 2016, but it was always on the back burner. And so I had to move my painting. I decided in 2016, 2017 that I was going to move my painting from the back burner to the front burner. And there's a lot of synergy between painting and cooking because they're creative endeavors that are process oriented. And so my ingredients now are color, right? And I mix my own colors just like I mix food or condiments or sauces or anything else. But the biggest thing about painting, just like cooking, is that I stay in the process. In other words, when I'm painting, I'm not thinking about the final result. I am focusing on the journey of how I'm going to get there, of just being in the moment, being present in the moment. And I have bring a wonder and curiosity to this practice. And I think whenever you're bringing wonder and curiosity, there is a magic that happens that keeps you really present and in the process rather than trying to jump too far ahead. I find painting for me is really great for just anxiety, or when my mind is going all over the place. The only place I can be when I'm painting is right in the now. So, and that's the same way I've always felt with my cooking. So I think I'm going to use this phrase. I think my mantra is live in the smallest slice of now you can define. When I am painting
Oh,
or I am cooking, I am just right there, right now, the smallest slice of now I can define.
oh, thank you for that, Rebecca. That's really helpful. Also, I find so often when I'm in process, that thing that you picked up on, I bet a lot of people listening uh, maybe resonate with this or recognize this, where we're thinking about the end product, or we're basing that next decision. Okay, what do we do of kind of what it's going to be like at the end? And it sounds like in your advice is saying, no. Just much smaller frame. Like what is your hand going to go a little bit more? Like what is this very moment in your painting? What does it need a little more yellow? It's not whether the whole painting is going to turn out okay. It's just really being right there in your process.
And not being afraid to make the big, bold move. In other words, um, and this is a big one. If you're in the process, in my painting, for example, I don't know how it's going to end. I can only be in the now. And sometimes when I make a big, bold move and I take a real risk, something happens that I never could have dreamed up in my head, right?
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, like, wow, I stand back and I'm like, wow. Woo! And then I'm off on a different, you know, and that's where that curiosity and wonder of just not being afraid to take a leap, because it's just a piece of canvas. You know what I'm saying? It's not the world isn't going to end, right?
Well, I think there's maybe a confidence and identity that you're also bringing to the canvas and bringing to the kitchen, that maybe people who are listening who are struggling a little bit with this idea of really kind of letting go of judgment in a way, being trusting your process, being involved in it. It sounds appealing, but it's, I think, hard for people to do. And at the same time, as you describe it, it's really, it's what we should be focused on. It's in some ways the lens by which we're getting the rawest form of life. It's what's right in front of us, right in the here and now. Um, and also, I think, you're describing that freedom from a sense of judgment. And I wonder if that's just, in some ways, you're very veteran and skilled artist, whether it's the canvas or whether it's food, that you're used to making a lot of stuff. And so you might have I think Rebecca might have a trust. If you're kind of hearing this and thinking like, I'm not sure I can do that. I think Rebecca has a trust in her process that I know I struggle with sometimes. And I bet some of you listening struggle with sometimes. That like you have a trust to make the big bold move because you've seen it not work out, and like you'd rather be the person that makes the big bold move and sometimes have it not work out, because boy, when it works out, it's like, wow, pistachio, radicchio, like, whoa,
Right, exactly. Right.
and I love that. And I think it's because you've done it a lot. And I wonder if, you're really reminding us in this podcast, in this episode, yeah, you got to trust your process. It's not about working out. It's about, kind of working within that process that makes you who you are.
Yeah, I have, as you pointed out, look, I'm 62. I've made a lot of, you know, if I could tell you how many times I've had to dump something like in developing recipes and things that didn't work out, and all those, frustrations and everything else. But at the end of the day, I learned from every single thing that happened. So I guess I'm standing from, that place of, where I've had some perspective to see that, I tried something, it didn't work out, but I gained something from it. I gained some knowledge. I gained some confidence. The world didn't end. And so maybe if you're just starting and wrapping your head around it, it's the littlest things sometimes. Like a big, bold move could be like in some little teeny way. Could be
Well,
squeezing lemon
I
on your
hope
fish.
some of you who are listening, yeah, excuse the line. I hope some of you are listening. Your big bold move is going to buy miso or
Yeah.
get a tin of anchovies and or some lentils and have some encouragement to get some more nutrient density. Or maybe, like Rebecca, you're a bit of an artist and you're going to be sketching a little more or drawing a little bit more or being involved in your process. But my sense is this podcast for all of us is a reminder of how much amazing, inspiring spirit lives within our process when we settle down with ourselves, whether it's in the kitchen or in the studio, or for me in the garage, working on whatever little project I have,
Yep.
and that to really give yourself that over the next days and weeks. And I take this reminder from a very, very wise woman and wonderful friend and chef and healer and author and creator. So thank you, Rebecca. It's such a treat to get to spend some time with you and to share your wisdom and to remind us all of how fun it is to talk to chefs about food and to really emphasize how these little moves, more herbs, more citrus, a little apple cider vinegar or some anchovies can really elevate our cooking and then get back to that original point you made, right? Let's really foster appetite. And if we foster appetite, kind of like if we foster motivation, the rest is kind of gravy. The rest sort of happens. So thank you, Rebecca. Thank you for this wonderful message, everyone. Thanks so much for staying with us for this episode. We will be back next week. Thanks so much for the feedback. Please share this with anybody who needs some inspiration around food. And as I say to you each time, please take some of these ideas, concepts, inspiring things, and take some action with them. Do something in your own life to just do a little bit to nudge your mental fitness and mental health in the right direction. I look forward to seeing you next episode. And Rebecca, thank you so much. Oh, and finally, Rebecca, how can people find you, find out more about you and your work and your books?
On my website, which is RebeccaKatz.com. And just so you know, I've got a recipe box. And there are 200 recipes up there. So go at
Okay, well,
it.
I think they should buy your particularly beautiful cookbooks, especially the Healthy Mind Cookbook. Incredibly delicious. One of my top 5 favorite nutritional psychiatry cookbooks. So we'll also put links to everything on our website and on the page for the podcast, so everybody can find you really easily. Rebecca, have a great rest of your day, everybody. Stay safe, keep taking care of your mental health, and I'll see you soon.